Check, 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 check. Is this the right microphone? Why? Beep, beep, boop, beep. How do I check this fucking microphone? Check, 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 check. Check, check, check. Beep, boop. Beep, boop, beep, boop, boop. The last words of the thrice great Hermes. Wise words, although written by my decaying hand, remain imperishable through time, imbued with the medicine of immortality by the All Master, be unseen and undiscovered by all those who will come and go, wandering in the wasteland of life. Be hidden until an older heaven births human beings who are worthy of your wisdom. Having sounded this prayer, over the work of his hands, Hermes was received in the sanctuary of eternity. Should I be reading the introduction? All right, let's read the introduction. Introduction, a forgotten spiritual classic. The Hermetica is a collection of writings attributed to Thoth, a mythical ancient Egyptian sage, whose wisdom is said to have transformed him into a god. Thoth, who was venerated in Egypt from at least 3000 BCE, is credited with the invention of sacred hieroglyphic writing, and his figure portrayed as a scribe with the head of an ibis, can be seen in many temples and tombs. He is the dispatcher of divine messages and the recorder of all human deeds. In the great hall of judgment, the afterlife court of the god Osiris, Thoth would establish whether the deceased had acquired spiritual knowledge and purity, and so deserved a place in the heavens. Thoth was said to have revealed to the Egyptians all knowledge on astronomy, architecture, geometry, medicine, and religion, and was believed by the ancient Greeks to be the architect of the pyramids. The Greeks, lettuce, cheese, tomato, who were in awe of the knowledge and spirituality of the Egyptians, identified Thoth with their own god Hermes, the messenger of the gods and the guider of souls in the realm of the dead. To distinguish the Egyptian Hermes from their own, they gave him the title Trismegistus, meaning thrice great. To honor his sublime wisdom, the book attributed to him became collectively known as the Hermetica. Although largely unknown today, the writings attributed to Hermes/Thoth have been immensely important in the history of Western thought. They profoundly influenced the Greeks and, through their rediscovery in 15th century Florence, helped to inspire the Renaissance, which gave birth to our modern age. The list of people who have acknowledged a debt to the Hermetica read like a who's who of the greatest philosophers, scientists, and artists that the West has ever produced. Leonardo da Vinci, Durer, Botticelli, Roger Bacon, Paracelsus, Thomas More, William Blake, Kepler, Copernicus, Isaac Newton, Sir Walter Raleigh, Milton, Ben Jonson, Daniel Johnson, Daniel Defoe, Willem Dafoe, Shelley and his wife Mary, Victor Hugo, Chad Hugo, and Carl Jung. Heavily influenced Shakespeare, John Donne, John Dutton, John D's nuts, and all the poetic philosophers who surrounded the court of Queen Elizabeth I, as well as the founding scientists of the Royal Society in London, and even the leaders who inspired the Protestant Reformation, in Europe. This list is endless, with the Hermetica's influence reaching well beyond the frontier of Europe. Islamic mystics and philosophers also trace their inspiration back to the thrice great Hermes, and the esoteric tradition of the Jews equated him with the mysterious prophet Enoch. The Hermetica is a cornerstone of Western culture in substance and importance. It is equal to well-known Eastern scriptures like the Upanishads, the Dhammapada, and the Tao Te Ching. Yet, unlike these texts, which are now readily available and widely read, the works of Hermes have been lost under the dead weight of academic translations, Christian prejudice, and occult obscurities. Until now, no simplified rendering of these writings have been available to the general reader. All previous versions in the English language are very dense, impenetrable, and loaded down with the notes and subtext that make them difficult to digest. This new version, however, makes this ancient wisdom more easily accessible. It presents carefully selected extracts of the Hermetic text, linked together in a narrative and rendered into easily understood English. What emerges is an inspiring and illuminating taste of a forgotten classic. The early origins of the Hermetica are shrouded in mystery, but the evidence suggests it is a direct descendant of the ancient philosophy of the Egyptians. However, the handful of surviving works attributed to Hermes are not written in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, but in Greek, Latin, and Coptic. I don't know what Coptic is. They were collated in the city of Alexandria in Egypt during the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE. Here, the Hermetic philosophy helped inspire some of the greatest intellectual achievements of the ancient world. Alexandria was a great center of learning, surpassing even Athens. Its founder, Alexander the Great, Macedonian, had conquered and united Greece, Persia, Egypt, and India into one vast empire. Unbelievable. Cultures that had grown up more or less independently were brought together, and there was no bigger melting pot than Alexandria. Into this new universal city, cosmopolis, poured men and women of every race and nation: Greeks, Jews, Egyptians, Babylonians, Phoenicians, and even Buddhists from India, associated together in relative peace. The Alexandrians were known for their thirst of knowledge, and under the enlightened Greek ruler Ptolemy the First, a library and museum were founded where human beings first systematically collected the wisdom of the world. At its height, the Library of Alexandria housed some 500,000 scrolls. Beat that, TPL. These include the works of Euclid, Archimedes, the astronomer Ptolemy, who dominated the spheres of geometry, mathematics, and geography, respectively, until well into the Middle Ages. It contained the research of Aristarchus of Samos, who had shown that the Earth is one of the planets orbiting the Sun, and Eratosthenes, who had calculated the circumference of the Earth to within a few percent. Scientists of the library knew about the precision of the equinoxes and that the moon was responsible for the rhythm of the tides. Alexandria was also rich in esoteric knowledge Pythagorism, Chaldean oracles, Greek myths, Platonic and Stoic philosophy, Judaism, Christianity, the Greek mystery schools, Zoroastrianism, astrology, alchemy, Buddhism, and of course the ancient Egyptian religion were all practiced, studied, compared, and discussed. What a time. The golden age of Alexandria came to an end with the birth of the intolerant Christian Holy Roman Empire. Despite the sophistication and cultural achievements of the ancients, the Christians referred to them dismissively as pagans. Oh, which means country dwellers. In 415 CE, Hypatia, Hypatia, one of the last great scientists and pagan philosophers working at the Library of Alexandria, was seized by a mob of Christians who removed her flesh with scallop shells and burned her remains. What the fuck? Their leader, Bishop Cyril, was later canonized Saint Cyril. The great library was finally destroyed as so much pagan superstition and this wealth of knowledge was scattered to the four winds. The Christian Roman Empire, Theodosius closed pagan temples across the empire and began the previously unknown phenomenon of book burning. For the West, the 5th century ushered in the 1,000-year period appropriately known as the Dark Ages. Oh, the Hermetica and Islam. History shows that whatever the works of Hermes have been studied, history shows that wherever the works of Hermes have been studied and venerated, civilization has flourished. Pagan scholars and sages fled to the newly emerging Arab culture, taking the knowledge and the Hermetic writings with them. 200 years later, the Muslims created an empire whose learning and scientific achievements were unsurpassed. By the beginning of the 9th century, the first university was established in Baghdad called the House of Wisdom. Here, many pagan works were translated. The scientists that have reached such heights in Alexandria were significantly developed. The sciences that had reached such heights in Alexandria were significantly developed, and the ancient pagan spiritual wisdom was covertly studied and practiced. From its exalted position among the sacred scriptures of Egyptian spirituality, the Hermetica became the secret inspiration for an important undercurrent in Islamic philosophy and the holy book of unorthodox religious sects such as the Sabians. He would never have heard the mysterious. We would have never heard of. We would have never heard of the mysterious Sabians had they not come into conflict with the religious authorities of their day. Several centuries after the death of its founder, Muhammad, Islam was beginning to succumb to the same desire for orthodoxy that had arisen in the Christian West. Heretics were to be rooted out, if necessary, with violence. In 1830 CE, a powerful caliph was passing through the city of Haran when he noticed strangely dressed Sabians and questioned their leaders. Asked to produce their sacred text, they returned with the Book of Hermes. This genius philosopher-scientist, Thabit ibn Qurra, was the Sabian who in 810 CE wrote the following rousing defense of Hermetic paganism. The unifying religion. In England, the works of Hermes had a profound effect on the circle of countries surrounding Elizabeth I. Sir Philip Sidney, Sir Walter Raleigh, John Donne, Christopher Marlowe, William Shakespeare, George Chapman, and Francis Bacon were all acquainted with the works of the Egyptian sage. Egyptian sage. Elizabeth's personal astrologer. These people got personal astrologers, whom she referred to as her philosopher, was the enigmatic Hermeticist John D. Gary D. Gary. He was a brilliant mathematician and the first person to translate the complete works of Euclid into English. Dr. D owned the greatest library in England. Now that's a flex. And his home was regarded as a third university to Oxford and Cambridge. He was visited by scholars from all over Europe and made frequent journeys to Prague, where the first detailed commentaries on the Hermetica were being written. At this time, Prague was the capital of Bohemia, an enlightened republic where Hermetic scholars, Platonic philosophers, Jewish rabbis, and scientists of every nation found sanctuary at the court of Rudolf II. Europe was being ravaged by the war of religion between Protestants and Catholics, and in Bohemia, another way was proposed: Hermeticism. Evangelicists of the new Egyptian religion of the thrice great Hermes, such as Giordano Bruno, traveled extensively in Europe. Bruno interpreted the new sun-centered cosmos proposed by Copernicus in an entirely mythical way as the rising of a new sun at the dawning of a new age. It's the age of Aquarius. He believed that we are the heirs and propagators of paganism. Happy is he who, for the sake of paganism, bears the burden of persecution with firm hope. Who else have civilized the world and built cities, if not the nobles and kings of paganism? Who else have set in order the harbors and the rivers? Who else have taught the hidden wisdom? And to whom else has the deity revealed itself, given oracles and told about the future, if not the famous men among the pagans? The pagans have made known all of this. They have discovered the art of healing the body. They have also made known the art of healing the soul, and they have filled the earth with settled forms of government and with wisdom, which is the highest good. Without paganism, the world would be empty and miserable. Habit Ibn Qura. Another unorthodox group within the Islamic Empire who also traced their ancestry back to thrice great Hermes, were the poets and mystics known as the Sufis. The 12th century Iranian Sufi philosopher Yahya Surwardi made it as life's work to link what he called the original Oriental religion with Islam. He claimed that the sages of the ancient world had preached a single doctrine. This had been originally revealed to Hermes, whom Surwardi identified with the prophet known as Idris, and the Quran, and the Jewish prophet Enoch. In the Greek world, he claimed that this philosophy had been transmitted through Pythagoras and Plato, and in the Middle East through the Zoroastrian Magi. It had been secretly passed on until it had reached himself through a direct line of enlightened sages, including his own master, the Sufi mystic Al-Halaj. Halalala. Not surprisingly, both Surwardi and Al-Halaj were executed by the religious authorities for heresy, Al-Halaj by crucifixion. Whoa. Hermes and the reawakening of Europe, with the Arab Empire becoming increasingly intolerant, the owners of the Hermetic books traveled in search of a safe refuge. In the 15th century, many fled to the tolerant city-state of Florence in northern Italy, where this wisdom again inspired a great cultural flowering. In 1438, the Byzantine scholar Plathon made available to the awestruck Florentines the entire lost works of Plato. These and other pagan works were translated into Latin for the first time. The ruler of Florence, the philanthropist, and scholar Cosimo de' Medici established a new Platonic academy, a group of intellectuals and mystics who found their inspiration in the ancient pagan philosophy. It profoundly influenced great names like Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, Michelangelo, and Raphael, all the Ninja Turtles, who began painting pictures of the ancient pagan gods. Botticelli's Venus and Mars, for example, was painted at a precise astrological moment as a talisman of occult radiance, capable of magically transporting the viewer to an altered state of spiritual awareness. Cosimo sent out agents to look for other lost pagan works that might still be awaiting discovery. In 1460, one of them came across the lost works of thrice great Hermes and brought them to Florence. The Florentines, already reeling from the discovery that an ancient civilization of immense sophistication had risen and fallen nearly 2,000 years before them, now believed they had in their hands the words for the most ancient sage of them all. Cosimo ordered his young Greek scholar Marsilio Ficino to cease his work on translating Plato and begin immediately on this new Egyptian text. Ficino had it ready in time to read to Cosimo just before his death. The emergence of a glorious new culture in Florence signaled the end of the Dark Ages. We call this period the Renaissance, meaning rebirth, which is a fitting name, for at the heart of the Hermetic philosophy is the idea of being spiritually reborn. The ancient pagan wisdom arrived in Florence at a fortuitous moment in history. Within a few years, the first printing presses arrived in Italy, and the pagan wisdom was printed and dispersed through Europe. Students of the new learning, as the Florentine experiment became known, were sent out as emissaries, beginning new movements wherever they went. Reculin, the father of the Reformation and teacher of Luther and Erasmus, left Florence and sowed the earliest seeds of the Protestant Reformation in Germany. Thomas Linacre founded the Royal College of Physicians in London. The mathematician Nicholas of Causa, the physician Paracelsus, the architect Brunelleschi, and the astronomer Toscanelli, whose famous map inspired Christopher Columbus. All owed their inspiration to the Florentine awakening of the spirit of ancient paganism. Copernicus's momentous claim that the sun, not the earth, is at the center of the solar system. Oh, that was Copernicus. Was a choice, not a discovery made after studying Hermetic / Platonic philosophy at an Italian university. On the first page of On the Revolution of the Celestial Orbs, published in 1543, like fucking 500 years ago, Copernicus quoted the words of the thrice great Hermes: "The sun is the visible God." That's what I've been saying. As in Alexandria 1,000 years earlier, the Renaissance viewed science, art, literature, and religion as part of a unified whole to be studied together. Yes, all aspects of human life were now opened up as a legitimate area of investigation. It was a situation that challenged the authorities of the Roman Catholic Church, and in 1492, with the aid of King of France, They crushed the Republic of Florence. Although the heady days of the new academy were over, the suppression was too late to prevent the ripples of its influence expanding ever outwards. Florentine scholars were dispersed across Europe and became known as the Fifth Essence, the taste of all things Italian. Art, sculpture, fashion, literature, philosophy was insatiable. Within less than 200 years, the Renaissance had conquered Europe. Mambo Italiano. The Egyptian religion of Hermes was the ancestors of the Greek mystery schools, the religion of Moses and the Jews, and the birthplace of Christianity. In Bruno's imagination, it was now poised to become the unifying religion in which all Jews, all denominations of Christians, Platonic humanists, and even Muslims could meet and resolve their differences. Bruno's courage and conviction was nowhere more clearly demonstrated than in his decision to return to Italy, where within a short time he was arrested by the Roman Catholic Church. He endured 8 years of torture, during which he refused to recant, and in the 1600s was led out into the Square of Flowers in Rome and ceremonially burnt alive. Fire. The vision of a universal Hermetic religion was fated to fade, but its influence remained strong amongst visionaries and scientists. Sir Isaac Newton, for example, like many men of his time, was passionately interested in alchemy, the patron god of which was thrice great Hermes. Indeed, the word alchemy means from Egypt. The astronomer Kepler published quotes from the Hermetica in his great work on the harmony of the world. In 1640, the poet John Milton celebrated the wisdom of Hermes' writings. Or let my lamp at midnight hour be seen in some high lonely tower, where I may oft outwatch the bear, with thrice great Hermes, or unsphere the spirit of Plato to unfold. What worlds or what vast religions hold the immortal mind that hath forsook her mansion in this fleshy nook? Il Penserosa. The demise of the thrice great Hermes. At the same time as Milton was writing, however, the ground was being cut away from under the authenticity of the Hermetica. Previously, these works had been believed to be of extreme antiquity, dating back to the time of the pharaohs. In 1640, a scholar called Isaac Casaubon published a textual analysis of the Hermetica, which showed quite correctly that the grammar, vocabulary, form, and content of the Greek version of these works dated them no earlier than the 2nd and 3rd century CE. They were not written by an ancient Egyptian sage, he claimed, but by scholars in the city of Alexandria. Their philosophy was nothing more than an exotic blend of Greek, Christian, and Jewish philosophy mixed up with astrology and magic. The Egyptian names that pepper the text were mere decoration and ornament. Casaubon was one of the most brilliant Greek scholars of his time, and with the encouragement of the Christian status quo, his damning criticism was generally accepted. Casaubon had dealt the Egyptian sage a fatal blow, and the Book of Hermes were destined to be forgotten as fakes and forgeries. When does it actually begin? This is the longest fucking intro I've ever read. In the modern world, we know from the actions of the tabloid press how one well-timed hatchet job can unjustifiably undermine someone's reputation for good. What they did to OJ. This is exactly what happened to thrice great Hermes. Casaubon was a fine scholar, but he was motivated by a hidden political agenda. The ultra-Orthodox James the first, was now on the throne of England, and he employed Casaubon and others to purge the magically inclined court of Elizabeth. Hermeticists like John Dee were ostracized. Later, Casaubon's son Merrick wrote a book which portrayed the great philosopher as a confused occultist. Dee died alone and forgotten. Nevertheless, some of Casaubon's claims regarding the Hermetica are true. The Book of Hermes are undoubtedly the products of many authors, not one ancient sage, and they were certainly composed in the first few centuries of our era. Hermes was credited with these writings. Damn. Even though we know they were the composite work of many scholars, but this does not discredit either them or Hermes. It was a common practice in antiquity for authors to ascribe their work to the god who gave them their inspiration. This was a mark of respect, not an attempt to deceive. On the second charge, Casaubon is also right to claim that the Hermetica was written down in 2nd century Alexandria. But all the modern evidence suggests that it does, in fact, express Egyptian beliefs filtered through the understanding of the Greek scholars of the period. Even if Casaubon's criticisms were correct, this would neither diminish the Hermetica's wisdom nor alter the fact that it has profoundly influenced some of the greatest minds in history. As old as the Christian Gospels and older than the Quran, it is one of the great sacred texts of the world. It is worthy of respect and study for these reasons alone. The wisdom of the pharaohs. When Casaubon was writing, very little was actually known about ancient Egypt. The hieroglyphs themselves were not translated until 2 centuries after his death. Consequently, many modern scholars now believe that he was wrong to see the Hermetic philosophy as a 2nd century invention, especially since the discovery of the pyramid texts of Saqqara at the end of the last century. These hieroglyphs are over 5,000 years old and yet contain doctrines that are identical to those expounded in the Hermetica. This suggests that the Hermetica may indeed contain the wisdom of the pharaohs, which scholars in the 2nd century Alexandria reworked for contemporary readership. Remakes. The Hermetica contains passages reminiscent of Jewish, Christian, and Greek works, and Casaubon saw this as proof that the Hermetica is a forgery created from a hodgepodge of these other philosophies. Alexandria was such an eclectic environment that this is plausible. The ancients themselves believed, however, that these traditions were influenced by the Egyptian philosophy contained within the Hermetica. The Jews lived for many years in exile in Egypt, and their greatest prophet Moses was brought up as an Egyptian. Moses was brought up as an Egyptian? Many early Christians lived in Egypt, and the Greeks were in awe of the Egyptians compared to whom they felt like children. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus writes, "The Egyptians are religious to excess beyond any other nation in the world. They are meticulous in everything which concerns their religion. It was only, if I may put it so, the day before yesterday that the Greeks came to know the origin and form of the various gods. The names of all the gods came to Greece from Egypt, for the names of all the gods have been known in Egypt from the beginning of time." Herodotus. Casaubon particularly claims that the Hermetica plagiarized the Timaeus, a work written by the Greek philosopher Plato in the 5th century BCE. Like the Hermetica, it includes the doctrines of astrology and reincarnation. Yet, these ideas played no part in early Greek religion. So, where did they come from? The answer is ancient Egypt. Over 100 years before Plato, the Greek sage Pythagoras had set out on a journey to acquire the knowledge of the world. This led him to Egypt, where he spent 22 years in the temples being initiated into the religion of the Egyptians. According to ancient Greek scholars, Diogenes Laertius, Laertius, Plato purchased 3 books of Pythagorean doctrines based on Egyptian wisdom, and these he adapted into the Timaeus? The similarities between the works of Plato and the Hermetica are not surprising, therefore, since many of Plato's ideas were direct descendants of ancient Egyptian philosophy. The Hermetica and early Christianity. Hermetic philosophy also influenced Christianity through the Alexandria Church fathers St. Clement and St. Origen, who synthesized pagan and Christian religious doctrines. It is due to such theologians, that the Hermetic concept of the world is found in the opening verse of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the world. Hermes thought was known to the ancients as the scribe of the gods and the master of the world. In the Hermetica, God utters a word which claims the chaotic waters of creation. The word, is even called the Son of the God. In Christianity, Jesus Christ, who is also called Son of the God, is identified as an embodiment of the power of the word. St. Augustine of Hippo, the influential 4th century theologian, who is familiar with the works of Hermes, writes, that which is called the Christian religion existed among the ancients and never did not exist from the beginning of the human race until Christ came in the flesh, at which time the true religion which already existed began to be called Christianity. St. Augustine Retractions. The influence of the Hermetica on early Christianity is beyond doubt. In 1945, works of Hermes were discovered amongst scriptures belonging to the Gnostic Christians of the 1st century CE. According to a note on one of the texts, this is why you should leave notes. Early Christian communities possess many copies of the works of Hermes. Just a few yards from the place where these scriptures were found are ancient Egyptian tombs. These were inhabited by early Christian hermits such as Saint Pachomius, 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 the founder of the first Christian monastic communities. The walls of these tombs are covered in hieroglyphics ascribed to the great god thought Hermes. They describe a spiritual rebirth into knowledge of God. In such places, early Gnostic Christians pored over the Hermetica. Under its powerful influence, they composed their own philosophy of a saving gnosis, knowledge, a direct knowledge of God bestowed by the Messiah, Jesus. All the evidence suggests that Cassable was wrong to simply dismiss the Hermetica as some cobbled together mixture of many different philosophies. The Hermetica was undoubtedly written by Alexandria scholars for a Greek speaking readership, but it contains a powerful echo of the ancient wisdom on which it was based. It offers us one of the best windows available to gaze into Egypt's remotest past. With its help, we can understand the mystical version that inspired the awesome Giza pyramids. But what is the Hermetic philosophy that has held such a profound fascination for some of the greatest minds in history? The mind of God. At the heart of Hermes' teachings is one simple idea: God is a big mind. God is a big mind. Collective conscious, collective unconscious. Everything which exists is a thought within the mind of God. This book is a thought in the mind of God. Your body is a thought in the mind of God. These ideas which are being suggests these ideas which are being discussed are thoughts in the mind of God. How can we understand this? Consider for a moment your own experience. Thoughts and feelings exist within your mind. You know the outer world around you because your senses give you information, which you also then experience within your mind. Okay. When your mind is completely unconscious, you don't experience anything. When is your mind completely unconscious? Ultimately, everything that exists in your life is a thought within your mind. Your mind, however, is limited by being trapped in a physical body. Imagine for a moment that it is not. Imagine that it is free to be conscious of everything at all times and in all places. Then everything that is, has been, and will be would exist as a thought within your mind. This is the nature of God's mind. He is not limited to physical body. He is the big mind within which everything exists. God is the big mind within which everything exists. What? What? Hermes describes the mind of God as the oneness which unites everything. What does this mean? Again, look at your own experience. You experience many different things with your mind. Right now, you're reading this book. Before that, you may have been eating or walking in the country. Yet all of these different things are experienced by one thing: your mind. It is the oneness that unites all of your experience. In the same way, God's mind is the oneness which unites everything. Are we just thoughts of God? If we can think many things, God can think everything? We could think everything. You can't think everything. How would you know everything? God knows everything. Hermes says that this oneness contains all opposites. This paradox can be understood by once more looking at the nature of your own mind. Some things you experience are hot and others cold. Some are bright, others dark. Some you call good, others bad. Nothing that you experience can be both cold and hot. They have cold, hot chocolate, chocolate milk, because they are opposites. Yet both cold and hot are experiences which you have. Your mind is the one thing that contains all opposites. Hermes teaches us that the mind of a human being is made in the image of God's big mind. The mind of a human being is made in the image of God's big mind. To help us do this, Hermes narrates a dramatic story of how God creates and maintains the cosmos. It is through appreciating the awesome beauty of the cosmos and understanding the fundamental laws by which it functions that we can come to know the mind of God. It was this vision which fixed the imaginations of the great minds of history. It was this vision which fired the imaginations of the great minds of history. It inspired the birth of science by encouraging them to explore the mind of God, by seeking to discover more of how the universe works. Some great modern scientists, such as Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking, still describe science as an attempt to understand the mind of God. The Hermetic philosophy places man at the very center of God's creation. Hermes declares that man is a marvel. With his mind, he may not only understand the universe, but even come to know God. He is not a mortal body which will live and die. He is an immortal soul which, through the experience of a spiritual rebirth, may become a God. What? What? This came from the library? A new version of the Hermetica. A book of this size cannot contain all the Hermetic teachings. It can, however, give an inspirational and intriguing taste of their core doctrines. The main surviving philosophical Hermetic texts are the 18 books known as the Corpus Hermeticum. Hermeticum? 17 survive. Book 15 is missing. What happened to book 15? The Asclepius, the Subitos, and various fragments. These works are dense and somewhat impenetrable. In this new version, therefore, we've selected key extracts and combined them to bring out the essential wisdom and inherent poetry that they contain. In this endeavor, we feel we are following in the footsteps of the scholars of Alexandria who collated these books from the ancient material that was then available, making them accessible to a contemporary readership. Our sources are contained in notes at the back of the book, but for most readers, it'll be enough to follow a progressive exposition of the essence of Hermeticism condensed into more manageable sections. Like many Greek texts, the Hermetic teachings are often presented in the form of dialogues between teacher and pupil. The voices change in the different texts, which can be confusing, so we've chosen to avoid this device and simply present a monologue by Hermes addressed to the reader. Although we've used the familiar term God in the explanatory notes which accompany each chapter, we've avoided this term in the text itself. Instead, we've used Atum, one of the ancient names for the Supreme One God. We felt that using this unfamiliar Egyptian name would allow the reader the opportunity to build up their own conceptual picture of what Hermes means by the term, free of any association they may have with the word God. It is a daunting task to present a new version of any work that is written in a foreign language and uses a distinct and unique conceptual vocabulary. Approaching a text which is also of extreme antiquity and has already been through the hands of a number of translations is doubly difficult. In book 16 of the Corpus Hermeticum, Hermes writes, "My teachings will seem more obscure in times to come when they are translated from our Egyptian mother tongue into that of the Greeks. Translation will distort much of their meaning. Expressed in our native language, the teachings are clear and simple, for the very sound of an Egyptian word resonates with the things signified by it." Stargate. All possible measures should be taken to prevent these holy secrets being corrupted by translation into Greek, which is an arrogant, feeble, showy language, unable to contain the cogent force of my words. The Greek language lacks the power to convince, and Greek philosophy is nothing but noisy chatter. Our Egyptian speech is more than talk. Its utterance are replete with power. In the ancient Egyptian language, the sound of a word had a magical power which complemented its meaning. Bang, boing. A view of language which we unconsciously retain when we talk of spelling a word. Translation inevitably means that we have lost this original power and clarity. Hermes teaches, however, that through the power of the mind, all things are possible. We have tried through the power of contemplation, which Hermes advocates to distill the essence of his teachings for a new generation of spiritual seekers. Although human culture has changed beyond recognition from the times of ancient Egyptians, the essential mysteries of life have remained what they've always have been and always will be. For those alive to these mysteries, the writings of Hermes are as relevant today as they are in the distant past. We hope this new we hope we hope this new version captures as much as possible of the Hermetic vision, playing some small part in restoring to this ancient wisdom the respect that is due. Lord of mercy. The prophecies of Hermes. In this chapter, Hermes describes the nature of pure philosophy, but laments that in future generations it will become all but lost. The philosophy that Hermes teaches is not just a clever intellectual exercise. It is about focusing the mind in deep meditation on Atum, an ancient Egyptian name for God. Just call it God. Such pure philosophy is about rising above mere opinion to experience directly the mind of the universe. Using the God given gift of our own little minds, we can come into we can come to know the big mind that creates and maintains the cosmos in beautiful order. For Hermes, spiritual philosophy is not opposed to science, as it often is for us today. The student of spiritual philosophy studies science as a form of devotion to God. Through understanding the secrets of the natural world, he is overcome with a sense of awe and reverence for the Creator. He appreciates the perfect order of the universe as if he were listening to a grand symphony in which every melody has been exquisitely combined to compose one magnificent harmony. Hermes prophesizes, however, that this spiritual philosophy will one day become lost and confused. Speaking from our distant past, he uncannily describes the predicament we find ourselves in today. Pure philosophy has been replaced by the teachings of clever intellectuals with no mystical understanding of life. People have ceased to see the universe as a source of wonder and no longer revere it as a work of God. Spirituality has come to be dismissed by science as primitive superstition. The profound wisdom of the ancient Egyptians is thought of as a dead religion and is little more than an archaeological curiosity. Hermes foretells that Egypt, once the home of spirituality, will become a desolate place deserted by the gods. Out of compassion for future generations, Hermes writes his wisdom in books and orders them to be hidden, like a time capsule of truth. Hermes' vision waits for its chance to awaken future generations who are lost and bewildered by life, people such as ourselves. The prophecies of Hermes. Pure philosophy is spiritual striving through constant contemplation to attain Lord fucking mercy. Pure philosophy is spiritual striving through constant Pure philosophy is spiritual striving through constant contemplation to attain true knowledge of the one God. But speaking now in prophecy, I say that in times to come, no one will pursue philosophy with single mindedness and purity of heart. Those with a grudging and ungenerous temperament will try and prevent men discovering the priceless gift of immortality. Philosophy will become confused, making it hard to comprehend. It will be corrupted by spurious speculation. It will be entangled with bewildering science like arithmetic, music, and geometry. The student of pure philosophy studies the sciences, not as fanciful theories, but as devotion to God, because they reveal a universe perfectly ordered by the power of number, because measuring the depths of the sea and forces of fire and magnitudes of physical things leads to a reverent awe, to the Creator's skill and wisdom, because the mysteries of music bear witness to this unsurpassed talent of the supreme artist who has beautifully harmonized all things into a single whole, suffused with sweet melodies. To simply love God in thought with singleness of heart and to follow the goodness of his will. This is philosophy, unsullied by intrusive craving from pointless opinions. But I foresee that in times to come, clever intellectuals will mislead the minds of men, running them away from pure philosophy. It will be taught that our sacred devotion was ineffectual, and the heartfelt piety and assiduous service with which we Egyptians honor God was a waste without reward. Egypt is an image of the heavens, and the whole cosmos dwell here. In this its sanctuary. But the gods will desert the earth and return to heaven, abandoning this land that was once home of spirituality. Egypt will be forsaken and desolate, bereft of the presence of the gods. It will be overturned by foreigners who will neglect our sacred ways. Ain't that the truth? This holy land of temples and shrines will be filled with corpses and funerals. The sacred Nile will be swollen with blood, and her waters will rise utterly fouled with gore. Does this make you weep? There is worse to follow.